And the other was to negotiate the long-term strategic frameworks that we could use to ensure a partnership that will last well beyond 2014. I think we made progress on both. Again, knowing history in Afghanistan and knowing how Karzai perceives that history, how his predecessors have had to balance internal threats and factions, as well as balance external interventions to get the necessary assistance while avoiding being perceived as puppet. We have to understand that, and we have to understand that sovereignty in Afghanistan, as it was and is in Iraq, is an ongoing, accelerating progress. We have to give way, and that is what I think we effectively did in our agreements.
Avoid being perceived as a puppet, meaning you think for political reasons he has to denounce the United States, he has to block the United States from time to time, he has to make what may be perceived as anti-American statements, or not be terribly supportive when something happens like the video mocking the Prophet Muhammad. The political situation in Afghanistan is such that he must do those things.
I think he's got to carefully measure opinion and reaction. You know, since the time of Ahmed Shah Abdullah in the 18th century, the primary imperative of an Afghan leader who rules from Kabul is pretty simple: stay alive. It hasn't changed up until the time of Hamid Karzai. Mm-hmm. We went through a lengthy period that, of course, just happened to coincide with my tenure, in which President Karzai was quite tempered and measured in what he said publicly about the United States. That was because, in part, we were trying to convey to him, we get it. You know, we understand your concerns about night operations and the huge sensitivity on the part of Afghans of U.S. forces entering and searching Afghan homes. This gets at one of the most basic concepts of honor in Afghan society. I said, we get it. Let's negotiate some memoranda of understanding that make it clear you're going to lead. Your guys are going in. We'll be there. We'll drive the bus, the helicopter. We'll maintain the inner cordon. We're not going to search. You're going to do it. We're going to hand detentions over to you. Another visceral issue in the Afghan concept of honor. And I think by demonstrating that we understood these things, we made it possible to get that long-term strategic partnership because he believed in it. And also, I think we were able to lower the temperature of the relationship. In the case of the Quran burnings in the spring out at Bagram,
right.
You know, it was Afghan forces under Karzai's leadership that stepped forward to defend life and property, including international and American life and property, because our forces clearly could not be seen. Yet among his orders were, keep demonstrators away from foreign installations. Don't let them get close. So it's not is it a perfect relationship? No relationship is. Is it a workable one? Yes, very much.
Ambassador, I can't leave this subject without asking you about the scandal of the last few days, which, as everyone in this room knows, affects two generals with whom you've worked very closely over the years, General Petraeus and General Allen. My first question is, do you think that this will have any practical effect on the ground in Afghanistan?
In a word, no. I would say more broadly, all I know is what I'm reading in the newspapers, which is always the case. If I'm reading it in the newspapers instead of listening to NPR as I should.
Of course. Thank you. All right.
Is highly confusing.
Thanks. Yeah, that's us. Yeah.
That would. You know, I soldiered for almost 2 years with General Petraeus in Iraq and for over a year with General Allen in Afghanistan. There are no two finer men who have worn the uniform of the United States forces than those two men.
What are your thoughts on General Petraeus' career ending the way that it has now ended?
Again, we have to see how all this unfolds. I think that he dealt with this latest incident as he has dealt with issues throughout his career, with honesty, with dignity, and with honor.
Okay. I want to ask also, Ambassador, in the time that we have, about Libya. There are many directions we could take this discussion. Let me, for purposes of this discussion, however, set aside the debate over what happened after the attack on the consulate in Benghazi, with which everyone, I'm sure, is familiar here. But I'd like to ask one question about what happened before. As a diplomat with the experience that you have had, knowing whatever you may know about this incident, was security sufficient at the consulate in Benghazi at that time?
Many would point to the fact that we lost an ambassador and 3 other Americans as prima facie evidence that it wasn't. But we are working in a very uncertain region at a very uncertain time. No one knew this better than my friend and colleague, Chris Stevens. And as Wendy alluded, we in NEA are a pretty small tribe. We all felt his loss. I knew him since he joined the department in '91. I also know that there was no American diplomat who understood Libya better than Chris did, more than 2 years on the ground, that he knew the dangers, that he knew the risks, that he knew the importance of Benghazi as the center of the revolution, that he did not take unnecessary chances, that he and his security advisors thought that they had enough in place to keep him safe. But in the Middle East, what you don't know is often greatly heavier in weight than what you do. And what we didn't know is how well al-Qaeda was organized, ready and waiting. We didn't know it. Is that an intelligence failure? I wouldn't say so. Tracking al-Qaeda is pretty tough stuff, and of course they have lost a lot more of them than we have lost of us as a result of their efforts. Are there lessons to be learned? There are. One of the lessons I hope we don't think we learned is let's retrench, let's have fewer engagements, let's go out less, let's do less, let's know less. That would be a horrible way to acknowledge Chris's sacrifice.
Are you saying that a lesson for laymen like me is that diplomacy is a risk, that if you're doing it properly as he seemed to do it, you need to be prepared to take risks, and we need to be prepared for the occasional loss of a life?
Steve, that's exactly what I'm saying, and it's as true for journalists as it is for the rest of us. The chances that you personally have taken, as well as your colleagues, and the losses testify just to that. Look, we're the foreign service. Foreign because 75 to 80% of us are deployed abroad any given day. The Marines consider themselves expeditionary. We're far more expeditionary than they are. We're supposed to be. And we're a service. Just as our brothers and sisters who wear the uniform of the United States, indeed, we swear the same oath that they do, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That doesn't mean in the cafes of Paris and the patisseries of Belgium.
Although they're nice.
Very nice. I mean, Paris is a great place to change planes, when you're going somewhere where it really counts. So
anyone who may be French here, no offense intended.
So yes, we have to be prepared to go to dangerous places, do difficult things. That's what Chris Stevens was doing, to understand and to influence the new ascendancy in Libya. If you don't deal with them, you're not going to affect their behavior or even know what their agenda is. I would like to see us find ways to get diplomats, or more diplomats, not saying there are any, into Syria. We're not going to understand what's going on with the Syrian opposition if we don't have our own people on the ground. And yes, we'll lose some. That's a tragedy. It's a tragedy when we lose every single service member. I went to dozens and dozens of ramp ceremonies as I saw our dead American service members go home from Afghanistan for the last time. Well, there's nothing that makes us immune to that risk. And if we're doing our jobs right, we're going to run that risk. I was an ambassador 6 times. In 3 of those posts, a predecessor was assassinated. It's not new. It's part of the cost of doing America's business. America, I think, is ready to accept that. The American people are ready to accept that. And I simply hope that we don't take the position after Chris's assassination that, gee, we shouldn't expose our people to danger. We need to do it.
Did the kind of security that was essential in Afghanistan and Pakistan, considerably more extensive than exists in Libya or has existed in Libya, make it hard for you to do your job at all?
Hey, again, we've gotten better at a lot of things over time, including how we do security. The quality of our diplomatic security cadre has improved immensely over the years. We have language-speaking diplomatic security officers, senior regional security officers who have served in the region, know the place, know the players, know the language. They're in the business of risk management, not risk avoidance. The trick is not to treat them as an obstacle, somehow to be overcome, but as a partner to help you perform an essential mission and get back safely. So, a good dialogue between senior embassy leadership and the senior security officer is crucial both to the safety of diplomats and the execution of the mission. But I've worked with some of the best, and I have found in every case, whether it's in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, that regional security officers are dedicated to getting your job done and bringing you back alive, recognizing that there is risk inherent.